He wants me.
Dear Lord.
Ask you to back me up.
Sounds personal.
This game was originally released on Xbox 360 as simply Vampire Rain. If there are any version differences between 360 and PS3, I'm not aware of them going into this review. Vampire Rain was universally panned. There are a huge amount of negative reviews of the game. People absolutely trashed it. However, the game is a lot better than most of the mainstream gaming sites and channels who initially covered it would have you believe. I went into Vampire Rain Altered Species expecting an absolutely horrendous experience, but I found it wasn't so bad, and actually pretty entertaining at points. This section includes spoilers, so skip to this timecode if you wish to avoid them. In Vampire Rain Altered Species, you play as Lloyd, who is definitely not the love child of Sam Fisher in Solid Snake. Lloyd is the sole survivor of an attack by a Prime Walker and saves a young girl in the process. He is assigned to an anti-Nightwalker covert task force deployed by the AIB to liberate a city infested with Nightwalkers. Your goal is to eliminate the Prime Walkers, and since there is a vampire hierarchy, destroying the Prime Walkers effectively destroys all the lesser Nightwalkers instantly. You're also tasked with finding the previous task force which was deployed, but they're dead and you basically just scavenge their ammo. During the mission, the AIB cuts off communication with your team, and then they deploy human-vampire hybrid forces to eliminate Lloyd and the remaining team members. That actually happens. One of the team members turns out to be a traitor, but it isn't revealed who. Lloyd, Kelly, and the team leader have a standoff, and Kelly reveals that she's the traitor. She's gonna kill them both, but the captain rigged her gun to explode.
I fixed her gun to explode.
It is revealed that the AIB sent the hybrids in an attempt to escalate the conflict into all-out war with vampires. I don't know why they needed to kill Lloyd and his team to do that. The captain and Lloyd continue to fight the Prime Walkers and eventually defeat the final one. The captain reveals he was bitten and Lloyd kills him. Lloyd then encounters Monique and they fight. Then Lloyd is given the option of killing a final vampire who wasn't really involved at all. I shot him in the head, but he just comes back regardless of your choice. Then Lloyd gets some sleep to prepare for the next mission. Well, right out the gate, it's pretty bad. You're shown various cutscenes of vampires throughout the game that seem totally irrelevant to the overarching plot. Oh, sorry. They don't really use the term vampires throughout the game. It's always Nightwalkers. I guess there are, like, natural vampires that don't die from sunlight, but then there are Nightwalkers or something. I don't really know. It doesn't really explain it that well. The weirdest thing is that Monique and the last vampire, I don't actually remember his name, just don't have any real relevance to the plot. It also has the typical traitor twists and the turns that don't really make any sense. You're periodically shown a little girl throughout the story, and I'm not entirely clear on if it's Monique or if it's a different little girl or it's the girl that Lloyd rescued or whatever. I'm just not sure. The story is basic and I would call it acceptable because even though it's predictable, it's not offensive to my intelligence. That also translates to gameplay because Vampire Rain actually does respect your intelligence for the most part. Vampire Rain Altered Species is 100% a stealth game, at least for standard levels. Boss encounters get a little bit muddy. It becomes apparent very quickly that you are not supposed to fight the enemies you come across. If you watched my Lords of Shadow 2 review, you may have gotten the wrong impression that I hate stealth. I don't hate stealth games. I hate games that are not designed around stealth that shoehorn it in for no reason, like Lords of Shadow 2, or The Order 1886. I think the fourth stealth was why the game was so poorly received. Vampire Rain is a stealth game with very structured levels and you need to go through the steps as the developer intended. There are often parts where two vampires are facing each other talking. You can see via the minimap that they're watching each other's backs. It's clearly meant to be a signal that you're not supposed to go that way and to find another route. It would be very frustrating if you didn't use your head to make that assertion because, as I said, the game is very structured and every level falls into a series of steps that you need to execute in the intended order. Standard enemies will kill you in 2 hits. It may as well be 1, because if you get hit the one time, you're toast. You're sent flying and your recovery speed is slower than the vampire will close the distance and hit you again. If you get that big red caution pop-up, you may as well just sit tight and let the vampire kill you, since it's unlikely you're going to come out of it alive. Just accept the inevitable. That being said, vampires are not invincible. You can kill them, but they are very durable. Your initial pistol is worthless. Forget it even exists. Both your machine guns require an entire magazine to kill an enemy if you're lucky and you connect every bullet. That requires you to be very far away from your target and also do controlled shooting to ensure every bullet connects. The game does require you to do some precision shooting, but it's always in a situation where you have ample space and time to actually kill the vampires. Once you get a shotgun or sniper rifle, you're absolutely capable of annihilating them. Shotguns basically become your standard gun later on. They kill vampires in 1 or 2 hits depending on your distance from them. You also get a sniper rifle for dedicated sniping sections, and you also get it as a dedicated boss weapon for the end of the game. The sniper rifle is pretty fun to use, but you don't get too much time with it since it's a long-ranged one-hit kill, which is kind of counterintuitive to making you sneak around. You're also given UV knives at various intervals to take out targets you cannot sneak around. The UV knives are single-use one-hit KO on unaware enemies from behind. Vampires have a hierarchy. Basically goes Prime Walkers, Parent Walkers, regular Night Walkers. You can differentiate these by using your night vision goggles as they're all color-coded. It'll also tell you what enemies are standard humans versus vampires, but that largely goes out the window since about midway through, pretty much every person you encounter is a vampire. Basically, it means if you have one UV knife and there are 3 vampires standing around, you need to kill the parent vampire. Then the remaining child vampires will die. It's also kind of the whole point of the game. You're killing the 4 Prime Walkers to essentially totally rid the city of vampires. Vampires aren't really the only enemies in the game. You'll also occasionally get into gunfights with, I guess, hybrid vampire soldiers. These are significantly more forgiving, obviously. You're much more durable against bullets than to vampire claws, apparently. You have a regenerating health system that doesn't really see any use in the main game, but when you're in shootouts or boss fights, it can be pretty useful. If you stay crouched and still, over time you'll regenerate health. So you really can't ever die in these shootouts with the hybrid vampires because there's always ample cover around and you just wait for your health to recover. You also are required to do a few shooting gallery segments with your squad mates. These are as basic as you can get. Shoot the guys running towards you and don't let them hit you. Very basic stuff. There are a few boss encounters in the game, and obviously they take some liberties. The Prime Walkers absolutely feel significantly weaker than your average vampire because if they were actually stronger than regular ones, the game would be straight up impossible. These fights are usually something really basic and fairly gimmicky. First one, you have to lead him around the dance floor and drop mines on the ground and he'll step on them, then you can shoot him. You have to lead one of them to the end of a level. One of them you gotta shine lights on them so you can snipe them. The final 2 are just straight up shoot it until it dies. It should be no surprise if you've looked at the footage that this looks like a budget title. There's really nothing to make it stand out. The voice acting's pretty bad, but I found it more on the funny side of bad rather than like the crappy side. The soundtrack and sound effects are nothing to write home about, and you'll be hearing the same tracks a lot. It just really lacks a lot of the polish you'd want. I mean, the best way to describe it is absolutely budget title, and I think that really speaks for itself. Once you understand that you're supposed to avoid most confrontation, the game actually gets quite a bit easier. There are a lot of checkpoints, so even if you die, it doesn't feel very frustrating outside of a couple sections. As the game goes on, there are some challenging segments. A few sneaking sections require you to be very fast and occasionally feel like you need to get a bit lucky. There are a few sections where I found the only reasonable solution was to shoot your way out. Usually you can reduce the number of vampires via stealth and UV knives, but a few sections I did resort to gunfighting. Those sections can be quite intense because, like I said, if you get hit, you're toast. A few sections are what I would consider unintuitive, and I got stuck. I don't think I have any footage of it, but there's a section where you enter a facility and then a bunch of walkers come and you're separated from your squad and you need to go around a cliff. It took me a long time to find the correct path out of there, and that was just kind of a little frustrating. I didn't really struggle with many of the levels other than that, though. One I did have a lot of trouble with was entering the construction site. That section has a few alternative routes and the enemies have some tight timings for their direction changes. I managed to get through most levels without too many issues though. Some took longer than others, but I don't think it's terribly difficult. I think the 2 final bosses are the hardest part. More so the second to last boss. He flies around and you have very tight windows for getting damage in on him, especially in the 3rd phase. You're not really set up for fast movement, and you need to do some fast repositioning to dodge his projectiles. The same thing goes with actually damaging him. He flies around the room and speeds up after set intervals. In the final phase, he is very fast, and you need to be very fast with your sniper rifle, which you just haven't really had to do throughout the entire game. The final boss is very similar, but I think it's easier overall. She jumps around the room throwing fairly easy to dodge knives, and if you do get hit, you have ample cover to just kind of regenerate your health. Damaging her can be a problem, but if you nail her while she does her flying kick at you, you deal a huge amount of damage. And if you hit her like 3 or 4 times like that, she dies, so that's all there is to it. The game can feel a bit repetitive, as you're always doing the same things over and over in the same environments. I lost some footage, so I don't have a complete playthrough to give an accurate measure of length, but I can give you an estimate. I lost 9 missions and there are 24 total. The missions I have footage for total 6 hours, 44 minutes, and 30 seconds, which is 404 minutes and 30 seconds. That makes the average mission length about 27 minutes. 27 minutes times the 9 missing missions is 243 minutes. 243 plus 404.5 is 607.5 minutes, and that translates to just over 10 hours would be my rough estimate. I'm going to call it 10 hours and 30 minutes just to be safe. I think it does run a bit long. I think it would have been safe to cut out 4 or so missions and cut the total down to 20 or less, and that would have been fine and you probably wouldn't have lost anything. Although I did strongly consider replaying the missions I lost. I honestly wouldn't mind replaying them, and I might in the future. I actually found most of the game fairly enjoyable, believe it or not. There's definitely a sense of satisfaction associated with completing a bad and unplayable game or a really hard game. I got stuck in a few sections and there really isn't a reliable guide anywhere on the internet as far as I could tell, but I didn't really look that hard. I try my best to avoid guides, but I will resort to them if I'm taking really long to figure something out. I just don't like doing that. I had to do that a bit for Vampire Reign, but it felt pretty good to overcome those few problem areas and beat the game completely by myself. The cutscenes are often pretty damn funny. I believe unintentionally so. I'm so glad that I got the footage of Kelly being kidnapped that I used for the next episode preview because it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. One of your squad mates starts going, "I should have never left college, I'm not cut out for this," and the second he started saying those things I knew that he was toast. Sure enough, at the end of the mission, they were dead. There's some hilarious ones with Kelly. I'll just send them in. It's kind of spoiler territory, but who cares? You don't really care about the story of this game, trust me.
I fixed her gun to explode. She's lucky I thought to reduce the amount of powder. I suppose she'll wake up with a migraine. That's more than what she deserved for killing Hanson.
What put you onto her, sir?
Hanson's death. The kid had access to a motion sensor. But he didn't report any contacts. On top of that, he never fired a shot. That's when I knew we had a traitor in our ranks. At the time, I didn't know if it was Kelly or you. That's why I fixed both of your guns before handing them over. I'm sorry about that, but I didn't know which one of you I could trust. I guess that's why you're the boss.
It's perfect. I wouldn't change a damn thing about it. Like I said, this is kind of hard for me to do. It's not great, but I don't hate it. I definitely think it's not even close to as bad as people would have you believe. Vampire Reign is really not that bad. I feel like it definitely got a lot of unjustified hate by people too ignorant to figure out its nuances in an era where handholding was most mainstream. I don't even think it's that hard. I don't even think it's that difficult to understand. I just don't understand how this got so much hate. It does feel dated, the graphics aren't really up to scratch, and the gameplay is very similar to something you'd find on PS1 or very early PS2. That, in conjunction with it being an almost pure stealth game, can be off-putting if you came into it with the wrong impression, which I think a lot of people did. If you keep an open mind, it can be fun to figure out what the game wants from you, and some of the cutscenes are laugh-out-loud hilarious. But that being said, I'm not here to recommend you crappy games, I'm here to recommend you the creme de la creme, and I just don't think Vampire Reign is the creme de la creme. I spent like $7 on it shipped to my house, so it's not like it was a huge investment and you could probably buy it for the same, and I feel like I got my money's worth out of it. Well, there you go. Maybe not the scariest game, but happy Halloween. The next game is seriously the stuff of my nightmares, though.
Look at this, I can't do anything. I'm not doing anything, I'm just getting hit.